Superintendent. My name is Terry Holmes, and I'm the school superintendent in Wakefield, and it's my great pleasure this morning to welcome Dr. Dan Shoreman to our program to talk about some of the issues around the educational concept called primary intermediate. Dr. Shoreman has been a long time, very successful teacher in the Wakefield School Department, and last year stepped forward to take over the principalship at the Walton School. This year has taken on another responsibility of both the Walton and the Doyle schools. And so welcome to our program today, Dr. Shoreman.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes.
In the spring of 1996, we spent a lot of time looking at the issue of class size. And it was one of the major goals of the school committee. And out of that, we explored 7 or 8 significant options of how we might lower class size in the Wakefield School Department. And one of the issues that in the final analysis got most of the attention and that we decided to explore further was to get some educational advantage, deal with lowering class size, and deal with some of class size equity issues by using a concept called primary intermediate. Mm-hmm. Now, you and I perhaps have a pretty good sense of what that is, but right. For our public this morning, what should they think about when they think of primary intermediate?
Well, let me use the Doyle and Walton schools as my example. At the present time, both Doyle and Walton are kindergarten through 4th grade elementary schools. Going to the primary intermediate concept, we would take all of the kindergarten and 1st graders, 2nd grade, is the swing grade, and they would be in a primary school, and then we would take all of the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th graders, or 3rd and 4th graders, and they would become the intermediate school. So looking at it in terms of Doyle and Walton, either Doyle or Walton would be primary, and either the other would be.
So in a sense, it's just a realignment of K1, right. 2, in many school departments, 3, 4, 5, exactly. And then a middle school of 6, 7, 8. Mm-hmm. That isn't necessarily the alignment in Wakefield, but the swing grade here would be really grade 2, and I know you're struggling with that issue, mm-hmm. and we'll talk about it in a few minutes. What do you sense when you set about this task force to look at this thing? What were some of the major objectives that you looked at? What were some of the advantages that you hope to accomplish?
Well, we see 2 really major educational advantages, and one of them is being able to match teaching styles and learning styles. At a school like Doyle, which presently is K through 4, 1 of each grade, which we call a single-track school, the class comes in together in kindergarten, and they move together as a group through the 4 grades. With a primary intermediate model, these children would have 3 different teachers to be placed, and we really can match teaching and learning styles. In terms of the teachers, it's isolating to be in a single-track school, and to be in a 3-track school, which would be the primary intermediate model, the teachers would have more opportunities for collaboration with each other.
We now enjoy the primary intermediate concept now, I think, for the 6th year at the Greenwood and the Ewell.
Right.
Again, the Ewell being the K1 school,
mm-hmm.
and the Greenwood being the grade 2 through 4 school. Again, to emphasize a multi-track school as opposed to single-track would
Correct.
Be that there would be, in this particular instance, at least 3 different teachers at each grade level.
Correct.
That's what we mean by
That's
multi-track.
Right.
Are there other advantages you think of as you think about, certainly the educational advantages are mm-hmm. those that we most look for? Are there other advantages that we might
I think there might be equity in materials, for example. Just take a 4th grade, for example, in buying computer materials and library materials for 4th grades at Doyle and Walton, there's duplication. If all 3 were in the same building, you need 1 set of supplies, right. And I think that the cost, is more effective.
You talked earlier about that collaboration, teacher to teacher.
Yes.
I think that's a significant advantage. Mm-hmm. What do we mean by collaboration with teachers?
Well, teachers planning together. At the present time, we have some teachers looking at other alternative teaching arrangements, such as looping and multi-age. We have a multi-age study group that's currently functioning, and a couple of teachers that are very interested in that concept.
One of the advantages that I've determined after looking at the Greenwood program specifically at grade 3 and 4, that collaboration really has allowed some specialization in science and in math, which allows students, and of course because of the teacher specialization, to do more in those two subject areas, which are concerns in elementary schools. Most elementary teachers are great readers. They're good reading instructors. And I know that's one of your main interests is reading, but we certainly need to be increasingly aware of the math and science component to our elementary educational program. We don't often like to talk about some of the disadvantages of any new concept because we're so desperately trying to convince the public that we'd like to move forward. But like any concept, there certainly are disadvantages, and we need to be very honest with our public about those. Do you think of some disadvantages about moving forward with primary intermediate?
Well, one disadvantage is the lack of older role models for the primary grade students on a day-to-day basis. And we are addressing this, and we would look for opportunities to make those role models available, but they certainly wouldn't be there on a day-to-day basis. There are some transportation issues. Certainly some children will live quite a further distance away from their school. So we need to look at busing and carpooling
and some of those role models certainly might even be siblings, right? It might be an older brother or sister that would be in a single track school, K4, but there might be a fourth grade that has a younger sister or brother in first grade that lends some sort of support. So
some of our families
would be increasingly split, and some of those parents then would wonder how many PTAs they have to be involved in. And
one.
some of those issues, although you very nicely combined
As a matter of
those,
fact, we're already working towards a combined PTO. We have our first combined PTO meeting tomorrow night.
I met with you and the staff and several of the school committee members the other day, and we also found some real challenges around facilities. Now, I think we'll experience challenges with facilities on the west side, the Doyle and Walton implementation, even if we stay the way we are. But there were a couple issues that emerged. Would you share with us a little bit about what those may be?
Exactly. Well, one of the issues that we have a transition team of parents and teachers and myself that have been working on this since November. And one of the issues that we have been dealing with is space. That is a major component. The professional staff has recommended a K through 2 configuration in grades 3 and 4. That would necessitate grades 3 and 4 at Doyle, which would fill up the entire school, leaving us no space for our ancillary programs. So,
what are those, Dan? I think people want to know.
Well, we're talking
what
about
ancillary?
our moderate special needs program, our speech and language teacher, music, art. We have a computer lab, world languages.
And plus those little spaces that schools need for individualized reading instruction or special ed remediation or those kinds of things.
Our buildings were built before many of these programs came into existence, and we have had to carve out spaces that were meant for other purposes to fill those needs.
Well, the town was certainly most accommodating relative to providing new facilities, certainly over in the Dahlberg Montrose, and we hope to have in 5 or 6 years a new school on the Woodville site. But the long-range plan certainly calls for things not necessarily to be addressed on the west side of the community for quite a few years. So
another generation.
This is another way, the primary intermediate, to try and get some of the advantages that new facilities would provide without necessarily building them there. But there are always challenges, and again, that's why they hire you and I, is to try and solve some of those challenges. You spoke about the K-1-2 option at Walton and the 3-4 option at the Doyle. Are there other options?
Yes, we're looking at other options as well. One of them being K-1 at Doyle and 2-3-4 at Walton. Those are the two main options that we're looking at, but we're looking at other configurations as well.
Sure. And that option will provide a set of challenges as well, I mean, of compromises or Is it your belief, and I'm putting you a little bit on the spot this morning, is it your belief that still the advantages, even with some of the challenges that we face, should push us forward toward implementation of this concept?
I do believe that, and I think the advantages or the disadvantages of the single-track school very much outweigh the advantages of the primary intermediate split.
So, additional facilities are one of those challenges. Another was the educational issue of second grade. And you're the elementary teacher. I've been around elementary schools a lot, but where would you, with all things perfect in this world, and they're not, where would you think that the grade 2 should be aligned?
Well, ideally, we would put 2 with K and 1.
Okay.
We would have a K1 configuration, a K2 configuration, and then 3 and 4.
Okay. And can you give me a little sense of why we would do that?
Well, grade 2 we view as a primary grade.
Okay.
Their assessment and reporting system is different. We look at K to 2 students as learning to read, and when children enter 3rd grade, they have their basic reading skills in place, and we go on to what we call reading to learn, where children are using their reading skills, and the curriculum becomes much more content-oriented.
Are there other challenges that you can think of today as we move forward with this concept that we need to be thinking about? Maybe that issue you raised the other day with me of even the possible need for a modular or two. I know we don't want to talk about that. I know that
The M word.
the issue of parking at
Right.
the Doyle, there are some issues. None of these things are easy.
Right.
How much of an issue do you think those will get to be?
Well, we feel that in order to do grades 3 and 4 at Doyle to the best educational advantage, we need more space in that building. So that is why we are looking at more than one option. Originally, we were looking at that option with additional classroom space.
Let's talk for a moment, just to change the concept a little bit. One of the initial reasons we even looked at this was the issue of class size and trying to lower class size. I think the public sometimes think that lowering class size is just to make our world easier. Can you give me a real good educational answer of why we want to lower class size?
Well, teaching is very different today than it was even 10 years ago. I'll just use writing for an example, teaching writing. When I began teaching, we would have things called story starters, and we give the entire class a story starter, and everybody would write on that same topic. The teacher would collect them and edit them and pass them back. Today we do writing workshop, where it's very, very individualized. Each student is working on writing on topics of their own choosing. We have peer conferencing, teacher conferencing, and it's just a much more one-on-one individualized approach to teaching.
And certainly the range of student need has expanded as we've moved special ed children back into the mainstream through that big word we use now a lot, inclusion. We've really tried to take kids back into the regular classroom and deal with their needs in that vehicle. Another thing that's very near and dear to your heart, Dan, is the whole issue of reading. And you talked about this second grade thing. The governor and the state board of education, the new chairman of the state board, recently came out with a very strong mandate to make sure that every child could read by grade 3. As a reading specialist, a guy who really knows a lot about reading, how do you respond to that initiative?
Well, we are looking, and the reading teachers are, at various options to make sure that this happens. We're looking at such programs as Reading Recovery and Wilson Reading Program and other programs out there where we can intervene early, right at first grade, one-on-one programs. So that is our goal. And
I certainly, even though my background is in experience and in teaching administratively, is a bit more secondary. I'm so encouraged by this movement toward assuring that every child read by grade 3. It just sounds so practical. Now, I think it's a bigger challenge than that, and I look very favorably on that, of concentrating resources and energy to assure that every child can read, because reading is so key to everything we do. Anyway, Dan, it's been a real pleasure for you to join me this morning. I publicly thank you for all the energy you've poured into the principalship the last almost 2 years. You've just done a wonderful job for us, and I know personally I appreciate that, and I know the Doyle Walton people appreciate it. So thank you for being with us today.
Thanks.